How's it going, everybody? Welcome out there. My name is Matt Robertson. Welcome to another episode of Raw Rules is Written. I am joined by my fantastic co-host.
Yep, Stefan Surratt and Dean Bad Wrong Fun on Discord and a couple other spots.
Stefan, we have finally achieved our ultimate goal of the whole premise of this show. Our special guest today is none other than, would you do the introductions, please?
Oh, I'm gonna copy Brendan on this because he always does it in the most succinct, perfect way. It is the founder of the feast, Joseph Goodman. We didn't quite get him in here as soon as Spellburn got him. I looked it up, 32 episodes. We had to go a few more than that, but we were very close.
See, now Julian's going to hold that over my head. Mr. Goodman, thank you for being a guest on the show this evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm glad to be here. I didn't know you shows had a competition. You should call this like Volume 2, Episode 1. Then you can tell them you got him on Episode 1. Or Season 2, Episode 1 or something like that.
It's probably more of a competition between me and Julian, but yeah, there's probably just a perceived competition in my head. But we're epically happy to have you on the show this evening. If someone's watching for the first time, can you tell them a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, actually, first, Matt and Stefan, thanks for having me on. You guys have a great show and have been, enthusiastic fans for a long time, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
But yeah, hi everybody out there. My name is Joseph Goodman. I call myself the publisher of Goodman Games, also the owner. Goodman Games was founded in 2001, which is a long, long time ago, and existed for 10 years before DCC RPG was ever published. So a lot of people think of the company as synonymous with the game. I think of them as two separate things. But DCC RPG was published in 2012, and I thought it'd last a couple of years because most RPGs have a shelf life of 3 to 5 years at most. And here we are, still ticking years later. People seem to like this game. It keeps getting reprinted. So I call myself the lead creator of DCC RPG. I wrote about 95% of the original rulebook, but I had a lot of other people give a lot of great, both traditional, constructive, crunchy feedback as well as spiritual feedback. So Doug and Harley were there from the very beginning in terms of, concepts. And then Michael Curtis and Brendan and many others helped with a lot of I always try not to name names because I always leave somebody out. So if I left somebody out, sorry. But a lot of people helped with the original conceptualizing early on. And a ton of playtesters. We playtested that rule set for years before it ever got published and did a beta version and all that stuff. So hopefully that answers. Is that good, Matt?
Yeah, that's great. Well, and it's been a long time, since you created and wrote the rules. So we can't really quiz you on the rules like we quiz Bob. Bob, he appendicizes each rule. So we kind of modified the questions a little bit from a more inspiration standpoint. So
actually, wait, can I offer philosophical insight before we drive into the question?
Absolutely.
So I think this is a great topic of conversation, which is that, when Doug and I, so the reason we created a DCC RPG, it was because D&D 3rd edition was good enough for me. D&D 4th edition, I just could not stomach. So, there's, you ever read Sun Tzu, The Art of War? There's this.
I have.
Yeah.
You're keeping your enemies closer with this one somehow?
Almost. It's all these like little one-liners, but one of them is like, if you want your troops to fight, you must sail to the other shore and then burn the boat so there's no way home. Like I always remember that one. If there's no going back, there's only going forward. And I feel like D&D 3rd edition was good enough that I never felt the need to create anything new because I could play that and I was happy enough, But 4th edition came along and that was like burning the boats. Like that game was not for me. And I'll tell you what I tell a lot of people, it's a fine game. If they just called it something like D&D Tactics or something, it would have been fine. But it was so different from the prior generations. So a significant part of the both creative and like business justification for DCC RPG was, we followed WotC's, they were the engine, we were the caboose. We followed their strategy and switched from 3rd edition to 4th edition. We were actually the first third-party publisher to release 4E titles. So we released 4E DCC modules at Gen Con 2009, whatever that one was. They sold great for like 3 to 6 months. I mean, phenomenal. Sold incredibly well. Then everybody realized they hated playing this game. So like after the first wave of sales, like we got no restocks. I just didn't enjoy it. It wasn't for me. So that's part of what financially 4th edition wasn't selling at all, and then also creatively I couldn't, it was not inspiring to me. So that's part of what led to this. But early on, the concept behind what we were trying to create, I have a draft somewhere on my desktop of Microsoft Word file called something like Joe and Doug's role playing game, because Doug and I were going camping a lot back at that time, and we were talking about, we need a game that's just flexible and you can do whatever you want. You're not like hemmed in by rules. Like that was part of the original concept. So part of the reason the book is intentionally vague in a lot of places, and part of the reason from a customer service perspective we routinely don't give answers, is that that's the point. You should feel free to be empowered to make up your own decisions, and make a judgment on the fly. You know, Gary Gygax would say, just roll a D6, and if it's odd, it's that. If it's even, it's that, or whatever. But so to some extent, I'm the worst possible person to ask rules questions, because half my answers are going to be, well, you decide.
And even though we've tried to give the rules and give guidance throughout the book, Stefan, you and I have both, preached that motto, make it your own, throughout the episodes.
I've said a lot. I think I was playing with some people a couple of weeks ago, and they're going, "What? Don't you know the rules? Why are you breaking it? And don't you have a show about this?" I was going, "I'm just trying to know what I'm supposed to break and how best to break it." There you go.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's dive into it, because we don't want to. Our first question, Elena, if you could bring that up. One of the things that people love about DCC is the increasing levels of magic results. So where did the idea come from for the increasing levels of spellcasting, the and more advanced tiers for like nuclear bomb at 32 plus?
Yeah, so a lot of DCC came from, I mean, it's just a mishmash of influences like so many other things, but there was like this philosophical approach to the rules, but then there was also this approach to Appendix N. You'll hear the term OSR thrown around a lot these days, old school Renaissance, and people lump DCC in with that. I see DCC as being separate, partly because DCC predated the OSR by many years. We were doing what people call OSR stuff, I don't know, 5 years before the OSR existed as a term. And I started rereading Appendix N, before it was cool. Now there's like a zillion books written on Appendix N and so on. But I'd come across this list of Appendix N. I mean, many people had. It wasn't just me. It published in the 1982 Dungeon Master's Guide. I'm answering this way too long-winded. The short version is several people had read a lot of books from Appendix N and recommended them to me, people whose, reading taste I admire. And then I started realizing these recommendations kept coming from the same source. Then I realized I should really just reread this Appendix N. And then I realized, especially after 4th edition, if I'm going to be creating my own version of D&D anyway, it should be grounded in the same inspirations as Gary Gygax, who basically created a game. He took a tabletop war game and sort of bolted it into this new framework, which became known as role-playing games. But now, many years later, we can start with the role-playing game rules and then attach them to the same inspirations. So that's a very long-winded way of saying, oh, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Well, how much did you create just kind of hanging out with Doug camping before you said, hey, this is it, I can put this in paper and make a game? Like where was the turning point?
Yeah, I probably shouldn't there were, I don't know, 2 or 3 camping trips. It wasn't like we spent years in the woods writing this. We needed electricity for the computer. But that was one of many inspirations, as well as we went to GaryCon, I think it was GaryCon 2, and play tested it there. Maybe GaryCon 3 and 4 and a whole bunch of GaryCons. So a lot of it started as conceptual, then sort of got written down and, evolved constantly. There was a beta rules in like 2011 or 2010 that a lot of people like 25,000 people downloaded it and, left comments. And plus I play tested it for years. You'll see I had a regular campaign in San Diego and then a ton of con games and like random mini con games. There's photos in the front of the book from some of those games. So it was a lot of stuff, just a lot of stuff. But specifically,
but you were pretty serious about making the game as soon as you guys decided to start writing down some rules.
I guess so. I mean, I remember during the 4th edition era, we went to that con. It's called Con of the North, and they changed the name. Then they changed the name again. It's run by Bald Man Gonzo. No, not Con on the Cob. It's the one that Winter Fantasy is what it's. I think it's called Winter Fantasy. It's sort of kind of the RPGA official con, or has been, and then we went to that during the 4E era, and I remember traveling with a couple people there who had read Fritz Leiber's works, and I had not read Fritz Leiber's works at that time, the Lankhmar books, and they were just going on and on about how great they are. And I guess I'm saying that was before DCC was really a notion, but I kept hearing about these awesome books I should be reading. And I've always read. It's not like I wasn't reading, but I was just reading other stuff and hadn't. Like nowadays you can find this stuff everywhere, but there was a time when it was really hard to find the Lankhmar books, and you had to like hunt to find the Conan books or the Harold Shea books. Like they're not on bookshelves. You have to go to used bookstores or find them online. And this was still in that era, long ago in 2009, before the internet was what it is now. So Yeah.
So as you were reading these books and this inspiration, we talked just a little bit about it before. You read about a spell in Dying Earth, right?
Yeah, there's actually a bunch of examples in Appendix N of what I'll call highly variable magic. In the Dying Earth series, I was trying to remember. It's the spell of forlorn insistment, I think it is. And I was like Googling it because it's like in the tip of my tongue. As I recall, might have been Kugel, but one of the characters casts this spell and he's trying to send the bad guy into it. Basically, it traps you in like a bubble under the earth, 600 miles below the Earth's crust. But if I remember correctly, he traps himself instead. He does, he reads the scroll wrong. He basically fumbles the spell check. So as I was reading all these books, I was like, oh, this is really cool, but you can't even make that happen in D&D. Like as you read through these books, you realize, Gygax took a portion of it. And remember, he was working with war game rules. So like he was just in a different place. You could barely find polyhedrons back then, like it was, I've heard of Luzaki's stories of when he first started importing the D4 from like this company that made math teaching tools for stores or for schools, It's like it just was a different era. But anyway, you can't simulate, or I couldn't simulate that spell in any edition of D&D that I could find. And then have you guys read the Complete Enchanter, the Harold Shea stories by Elsprag de Camp and Fletcher Pratt? They're about this like they're cool. It's about this unlikely.
It's going on the list.
Yeah, it's not like the best stories ever, but they're really fun. And the part that's really interesting, he's basically like a bumbling wizard's apprentice and makes boo-boos all the time. But there's this one spell where it's supposed to summon some number of dragons, I think like 10 or something. But he casts it incorrectly and he gets the decimal place wrong. So like instead of summoning like 10 big dragons, he gets like 1,000 small dragons. This series of books is filled with examples of people basically screwing out spell checks, just highly variable magic. And then of course the Elric stories by Michael Moorcock have, this is more patron. That's a lot of the
Ariok, answer me. No.
Yeah, exactly. I'll go kill 20 more people. Then will you answer me? Like there's a lot of the sort of sacrificial magic and, variability, in this case, driven more by a relationship with a patron. But essentially, it just all came from reading these books.
The different tiers when you were making it up. What was the first spell that was ever created? Do you know that?
No, I'm sure I should go back and reference. I mean, a lot of the early stuff came from, rereading D&D and being like, oh, magic missile is pretty cool, but it's always just, 1d4 per caster level. What if it was, can I get a laser out of this or like a nuclear weapon as opposed to just ting, 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 little arrows. So I'm sure the first one was probably some variation on some D&D spell. Probably magic missile because that's what just came to mind. I don't remember.
I mean, that would be cool if we had that bit of known trivia there. What the first spell made for DCC was. Stefan, what's our second question for Joe?
Your second question is, does Goodman Games take pitches? I think I've heard you say you may be opening up for like a big pitch thing before on some stream, but if you do, how should they be submitted by folks?
Great question. I should start by saying we have the DCC third-party license for a reason, which is that it allows people to create whatever they want for the setting or for the system. And as you guys know, Goodman Games will not only help support, try to promote your Kickstarter for you, but also buy copies of your product for our online store at pretty generous terms, which hopefully lets everybody make a little money off that. Then we carry stuff at our conventions. And in general, we try to support third-party publishers so you can sort of realize your vision. So that, to some extent, is how the pitch process works these days. Something we'll be adding soon is distribution services. Actually, Stefan, as you know, so we'll be distributing some titles to stores as well, which is something we're adding on now that we have our own warehouse and enough room to accommodate it. So when we take actual pitches, which I interpret as meaning writing that doesn't come with a necessarily layout or art or whatever, we do it right now in narrow fashion. Like for Dungeon Denizens, we opened up, I want to say 20 slots, something like that, for pitches for monsters. So we do accept them in these sort of narrow slots for specific projects. But if you have your RPG world, which is 500 pages, you've been working on it for 10 years, that's probably not something we'd be interested in right now. But I'd love to send you towards your own crowdfunding efforts.
Yeah. And I know Brendan has mentioned this at a couple cons I've seen him at. He's been like, don't show me your manuscript. I can't look at that. I'm a Goodman Games employee. If you show me your thing about laser bears and in 2 years I have something or that comes out that I was already working on with laser bears, I don't want, I want to be above reproach on this. So
yes, that's my favorite story about that was when we released DCC RPG. Obviously, it has 0 level rules, And like a year or two later, we got this very angry email from a customer who accused us of stealing his idea for zero level adventures. And he could prove he did email us a submission for a zero level adventure in like whenever, years ago, 2005 or something like that I'd completely forgotten and passed on. So I reminded him that TSR published zero level adventures in like 1985. Like I by no means invented the idea, neither did he. We were both just ripping off TSR. And that sort of ended that conversation. But Brendan's exactly correct. People will think you published an adventure with dragons and dungeons. That was my idea, and so we have to be careful about that stuff.
We've got a great question from the chat from Marsamel. What was the inspiration for the dice chain? Like I know the beta edition still had the percentages for the thief class and stuff like that. So the beta version was all just regular the 7 set of dice, right?
I think the beta version still had weird dice, but the thief percentages thing we went back and forth on quite a few times. I want to say it was either Tavis Allison or Michael Curtis Tavis did a lot of really good math at one. You guys might not hear that name Tavis because he's kind of semi-retired from the professional side of the industry, but he was the lead developer on our Janelle Jackway's like big book for Judges Guild #2. He helped interview her and talk to her a lot, and he's done a lot of stuff in the industry. But early on, he was a thought partner on a lot of. He's good at like random specific, really thinking through certain design elements. I only mention that because I associate him with some of the thief stuff and him helping me crunch through some of that, as well as Michael Curtis. But so I think the dice chain was in there, but it wasn't in that particular part. But in short, I just love weird dice. In the beginning, there was no way to get dice for DCC except by calling up, Game Science, Luzaki's company, who sold some of them. Because I had a D30 since I was a kid and a D100. You guys, those were back in the 80s. You could only get the 7-sided was that weird one. Do you guys have the one that Zaki imported that came in black or white? It was like this weird.
No.
I have a bunch of my dice bag.
I had a D30 and a D100, and I think I had a friend that had a D50 way back in the day. But yeah, it wasn't until DCC that I saw the other variations.
Yeah, I had them all, like from different companies. Koplo made the D24. I mean, back in like the 80s. I had the Crystal Cast, I want to say. Remember there's like barrel-shaped dice that were, hot for a while? I want to say, I think it was Crystal Cast that did those, but they first did like a 10 out of 12, then they did a 14 out of 16, I think, in that barrel shape. Zaki also did those. But between Koplo, Zaki, and probably some others, I had examples of all these dice, but they were, cobbled together. None of the colors matched, that kind of stuff. But anyway, I like dice. So when the game was first published, we got all these complaints because people were like, I can't get the dice. And I was like, well, you just got to work at it, which is not a good, not a good business strategy. So luckily Tom from Impact came along, and I don't know, 2 or 3 years after the game came out, he figured out how to mold dice to make it happen. And so we eventually were able to offer dice sets. But people tell me now that they're like, you just did this game to sell dice. And I'm like, no, actually, you couldn't even buy dice for the game for the first couple of years. It was actually really hard to play.
Well, we did. So the viewers out there, we are going back and forth between little kind of inspiration rules questions and other kind of more publishing side of the questions. So Elaine, if you could bring up question 3, this one kind of gets back into the rules a little bit. Is there a case in Appendix N literature that would allow for thieves to backstab with a ranged attack? And so this is kind of a question on, can thieves backstab with the out of melee?
I mean, so first of all, I'm pulling up on my screen here all the Appendix N books. The one that I don't remember that well is Jack of Shadows by Zelazny. Like, Leiber had a lot of great thief stuff, obviously, with Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. I'm looking at the list here. And Jack Shadows is all about a thief. And as I recall, it's a lot of like Dimension Door type stuff. But it's been a long time since I read it.
That's my way of saying the audiobook on my list, but I haven't gone through it yet.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't remember offhand. I don't remember one offhand of a thief backstabbing with a ranged attack. But I mean, the whole point is just taking your target unaware in a way that lets you, pierce the little space between the helmet and the breastplate or whatever it might be. So it certainly seems likely that that'd be possible. But
I think we've had some different answers. I think Bob said no, but Julian said yes. So the community kind of teeters back and forth between if that backstab could be from a ranged point of view or not.
Well, I mean, so maybe, Bob does Sanctum. Maybe somebody should go read Jack of Shadows and all 7 volumes of Fritz Leiber, or whatever it is. That's where the answer would be, as I recall. Those are most of the thief inspirations.
There's going to be some page in a Lankhmar book where it's, page 67, this guy gets an arrow to the liver.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, snipers, I think
that's a good point.
Work.
Yeah, you're onto something there.
All right, Stefan, what's question number 4?
Yeah, I love question number 4. I see people asking it, under what circumstance could we see another Joseph Goodman authored adventure? It's been since the 13th Skull, I think. And I imagine you're pretty darn busy. And so that's the real reason why. You have to run the company. You can't, and writing and all that takes a lot of time too, but people ask.
Yeah, no, I would love to write another one. You learn about yourself over time. It's not like you're born with an instruction manual. As everybody with kids knows, you have to get to know people and you have to get to know yourself. And I've learned that I can do businessy stuff or creative stuff, but it's hard for me to do them in the same day or even week or month. Writing DCC in part was possible because, frankly, 4th edition just wasn't selling. And I realized no matter what business stuff I did, it wouldn't move the needle. As Sun Tzu said, we had burned the boats backwards. So I just sort of shifted gears and focused on the creative side. So I think I'd sort of need space to do that. I will say the thing so you got Appendix N, and it's fascinating how many of these authors worked with each other, collaborated, were part of the same, circles in many ways. Like we went to visit Jack Vance's, the Vance Vance. We got the chance to visit Jack Vance's childhood home as part of the, Dying Earth Kickstarter. And we met John Vance and got to hang out with him. And he showed us all these old family photos. And his dad hung out with Frank Herbert, the guy who created Dune. And somebody else who I'm escaping. But he had these family photos of him as a 5-year-old playing on the beach while his dad, Frank Herbert, and some other famous author I'm forgetting, built a boat with plywood. Which they eventually sailed and didn't build it very well because it eventually sunk. But it's amazing how a lot of the social circles overlapped. And so I think Appendix N is this sort of, space of inspiration. But that group was largely influenced by a group that came before, like Algernon Blackwood, and what's his name? I'm blanking on some of the names, but I've come to learn about some of this largely from Brad McDevitt and Michael Curtis, who are both prolific readers and as sort of dive further back. And so part of what I'd be interested in doing would be frankly reading the pre-Appendix N stuff and having a chance to focus on that more, and using that to inspire more adventures. So whenever I sort of have the space to do that, that's what I'm interested in doing.
I was thinking, maybe it could be the top tier of a stretch goal of a campaign.
That sounds like when Joseph is at his busiest.
Well, something that's totally out of reach, and Joseph, he's well, they'll never get to this. If the community rises to that challenge,
Actually, we still have that stretch goal, which is Michael Curtis's record album DM screen. Anybody remember that one?
Yeah.
We put that onto, I think, 2 projects because it's such a crazy idea and to be really hard to manufacture because it's so big and unwieldy. We should just keep adding that. Actually, we should add that to Purple Planet. Just keep adding that until someday happens.
Do we get purple vinyl records as well?
I mean, we're working with Levi Nunez, who does amazing flexi discs. So maybe we can work in first stretch goal is first we'll give out the album cover, then we'll give out the album.
The flexi disc needs, I'm sure that's already part of the plan. The flexi disc can be purple. Say Brad's in the chat. He says you have time to write DCC 200. Start working on it now, and you'll get there.
Well, it took Harley 7 years, I think, for us. Well, not all him, but for him and us to get number 100 to press. So yeah, I guess if we start now, we'll be ready. I'm looking at my calendar. And
do you
pencil something in?
Kind of going off this question, do you have any little nuggets that are kind of queued away in your computer that you might want to expand on, or a little paragraph is written about?
Oh, he's probably waiting to be hey, Brendan, go write a thing about this instead of telling us about it.
No, some of it is I'll come up with ideas and ask other people to work on it. And sometimes that's, I always wanted to do a Micronauts adventure. And, half of this is really sophisticated, reading lots of books. And half of it is dude, Micronauts are cool. I just, there were certain toys I loved as a kid, and who wouldn't want to do one of those? So Micronauts, and also the whole red, silver face, one red eye. like ROM. Remember the ROM comics and the Cylons? There was like this era in American culture where like silver things with one red eye were like super cool. So I'd like to do an adventure with one of those on the cover. I'd like to do something inspired by Micronauts, and these might be similar. And the other one is I have this. So we published the Black Heart of Thaculon, which was the Gen Con tournament for I want to say 2019 maybe, which was based on this idea that I had. Him that no grave can keep. The basic concept. So basically this already got done because I, asked gave my nuggets of inspiration, which was 5%. Then other people made the other 95%. But I'd love to eventually circle back on this idea of some wizard who becomes so powerful that even the gods can't kill him, but they can cut him up into little pieces. And so they just cut him up and scatter him about the multiverse to like sort of constrain his power, but then like the heart and the lungs, and the brain are like slowly trying to make their way back to each other. And the basic premise is like, no grave can hold this guy. So once every 1,000 years, you have to go find the parts that have been slowly working their way back together and like rescatter them to slow him down. Something like that.
I'm sure someday is like, I need those god lungs. Get rid of these stupid human lungs. Give me those god lungs.
There's an awesome horror movie just like that. And that would be a great story. All right, Elena, if you could bring up question 5 for us. Our next question is more on the business side of things. How can a person transition how can the transition be made from modifying their favorite system that they're playing to creating an entirely new one? So this kind of speaks to a little bit about you were playing 4th edition and you created DCC. If somebody's favorite edition is DCC and they're playing it right now, how can they take that and adapt that and evolve into their own system?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, starting with like sort of the business side, well, really this is creative side too, but what justifies your edition? Like there are so many versions right now of D&D white box and D&D red box. Like every guy on drive-through has made, here's my version. And in this version, battle axes do 1d8 instead of 1d10 or whatever. Like it's just, you don't even know you're playing a different game if you were to play it. So I think the first is to articulate in your own mind so you can articulate to players, like what is the reason for this thing existing? Is it because you always wanted a different magic system or you hated the way mounted combat works or whatever? And whatever your justification is it a rules set or like a rules for mounted combat? Is it a very tiny thing or a big thing? I think if you're making a very tiny change, honestly, this is terrible advice, but like, maybe that's not worth going to that much effort. You're not, it is so easy now to self-publish. Now, a lot of people self-publish what is essentially versions of the same thing. I think if you have an idea that really will change the way people play the game and they can play the game and experience it and say, wow, that really felt like something completely different. That's when you have done something that warrants, making an entirely new game, so to speak. So I think a lot of it is that player experience.
I think I have an area that people, if you watch this, could that is ripe for that just kind of system. And it's something that I've been working on for probably about 1.5 years that always annoyed me is overland travel. Right. I don't think anybody's perfected overland travel yet. And so I've been working on a new system and stuff like that, or new rules just to kind of go with it. And it's ever expanding, but I still don't think I've got it right. I mean, just overland travel, because, most of the time it gets hand wave or it's too much or it's random encounters. How do you make that overland travel part exciting? Part of the story.
I mean, you're onto something. TSR did what they call it, the Wilderness Adventure Guide. I mean, that is a slice of rules that has been revisited periodically. And I'm sure you could, Matt, you could be the one, make the Wilderness Adventure Guide for DCC or the modern era. Yeah.
There's a lot of questions there on how you abstract. I think Mythic Bastionland, that kickstarted kind of recently. That was doing some interesting things with how that is. But you have to decide your level of abstraction is, I think, a really big part of that. Hey, if we want to know about modifying and creating a new system, especially kind of in the DCC, we need to get like a panel of like Dave Beatty and Jonathan Snodgrass and a bunch of the people who have done that in the past decade. They might have some good experience too.
Yeah, right now Bloat Games, just to give you a Kickstarter plug, they're running Evolve right now, which is like superhero RPG powered by, core is DCC rules, but then extrapolated to make superhero experiences, which is a cool idea. They took the rules engine designed for something else and are applying it to a completely different, genre effectively. That's a good example of taking, a system and modifying it to something new. If somebody can drop the link in the chat too, just in case there's somebody out there who hasn't heard of it, but So sometimes you're right. It might be more like sort of genre modification as opposed to rule system modification. That can be a good way to do it too.
Okay. Stephanie, you want to hit Joe up with our next question?
Sure. And yeah, I suspect I know the answer to this one, but will there be any Dying Earth pastiches and Tales from the Magician's Skull? Kind of like you all have done a Lankhmar story, so it's
2 Lankhmar stories, if I recall correctly. But yeah, no, I would love to. However, Dying Earth has been optioned for film/streaming rights, and so what that means is it's good news for John Vance and the people behind Dying Earth, but it basically makes everything a lot more complicated when it comes to doing anything like that. So I don't see it as a near-term possibility because it involves going through a very different process. I think John Vance would totally be up for it, but he now has a license with A24, which is the production agency, and so on and so forth, and it gets way more complicated. So somewhere down the road, maybe, depending on if the Netflix/streaming thing works or doesn't work or whatever, it would be
right
fun.
now there's like 4 times as many lawyers who get involved. So
Right, exactly. Yeah. But it's interesting because like Lankhmar had a ton of material published. I mean, Centipede Press has been doing their Lankhmar compilations. I think it's volume 7, which I think is the last volume, but it is like, I mean, shelf space in my shelf. It's like 12 inches of like shelf space now for the Lankhmar stories, whereas Dying Earth really there wasn't that much material for Dying Earth. So it feels like there's a lot of room to expand it. It'd be cool.
Well, that kind of leads into our next question. Lena, I'm going to skip one. If you could bring up question 8, and Brad mentioned it in chat as well. Are fans allowed to create adventures for licensed settings like Lankhmar, Empire of the East, Dying Earth? What's kind of the advice on that? And then Brad mentioned in chat, is the license that we had grandfathered for possible further Dying Earth adventures for us, for Goodman Games?
So for the first part, creating adventures for licensed settings, we Goodman Games cannot grant you that right. I mean, there's always fan fiction which you can put on a forum or something, but to actually produce something you publish and sell, that would have to be licensed from the estate of Fritz Leiber or from John Vance and the estate of Jack Vance and so on. So we can't grant you that right, unfortunately. I wish I could. We've received proposals, but it's not a Goodman Games. We don't own it. We pay royalties to somebody else because they actually own the property. To answer your other question about will there be more DCC Dying Earth? Yes, there are 2 or 3 more that we have planned, if I remember correctly. Number 9 has come out. There'll be number 10 and 11. The 2 that I remember offhand, we ran the tournament last year at Gen Con, which we still have to publish.
Oh, yeah.
And then we also, the visit to the Vance was really cool. And we got to hang out with John Vance and hear all these stories and see his dad's artifacts. And so Mark Bruner sort of led a project of creating a product inspired by that visit. Actually, if you're out there and you back the Dying Earth Kickstarter, you may not realize this, but we still owe you that. That was the last stretch goal, which was that we're going to visit the Vance and then create something TBD and provide it to backers. So you'll probably get that sometime later this year. Anyway, it was a really cool visit. Like his dad won.
We'll
all
get
these,
the
like,
emails now. Hey, where's my last thing from the
right?
Dying
Exactly. Don't email Goodman Games. We'll get it to you when we get it to you, but it is in the works. But like Jack Vance won like Hugos and Nebulas and all these like literary work. I've never seen one before, but like his son has this cabinet in the dining room full of like prestigious awards. Mostly I remember Mark Bruner, like, look, Mark Bruner was like, kept like, oh man, this is a Hugo, this is a Nebula, and you're like, don't drop that, So it's just like, it was really cool. So that visit, it gave us a ton of ideas, and we're going to do something based on that.
Sounds great. Now, you said you can't give the license to people, but people can, of course, they can create their own inspired by, they can probably list in their thing inspired by the works of, and perhaps, make it legally distinct enough, but perhaps it's for Withering Aerith or for the Imperials of the West setting. I don't know. That's probably fine. Not a lawyer.
I mean, some of it has to do with. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Well, even if you create something that's inspired by, Goodman Games can't approve those, so there wouldn't be official,
Party. But if you do it as a fan and you don't take money for it, it's just something you give away for free. I think a lot of authors appreciate that kind of enthusiasm, and just be careful how you use proper nouns. If you're careful with your proper nouns and it's inspired by, and it's something you do for free on a website or something like that. Every author is different, but some of them may actually be supportive of it.
Now, what about the other third-party settings like Weird Frontiers? Those would still go through David Beatty's company, is that correct?
Yeah, Weird Frontiers is, David Beatty, Stiff Whiskers Press, I believe is the name of his company, owns the rights to that. So if you wanted to do we actually have had, well, Stefan, you did one, I think,
Yep.
Weird Frontiers license. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that essentially has to go through Goodman Games and Stiff Whiskers Press to get approval from both. But yes, you can definitely do that.
What other, I mean, we've got the Purple Planet, we've got the Shutter Mountains. Would those fall under the umbrella of DCC?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that up. So Purple Planet, for those out there, if you don't already know, Goodman Games plus 7 other third-party publishers will be crowdfunding starting February 6th for Adventures on the Purple Planet. It's actually super cool. I actually don't think it's ever happened ever in the RPG space, but BackerKit is working on a way for us to launch 7 projects simultaneously that are all in the same landing page on their site. So, seriously, like, I don't think anybody's done this before. So we are going to, you'll be able to pledge for it from Goodman Games, and then pledge for the creation set in the Purple Planet from a wide variety of other awesome publishers. And it's going to be like a really cool creative experiment to see all their different takes on the same sort of core concept. So that one has been in the works for like a year. It's been a whole lot of planning. But once we get through this and learn from it, the goal is to eventually offer this to other publishers as well. So what we've talked about, actually, I'll drop the teaser here. I think the next, assuming this all works out and doesn't blow up, the next one we'll do probably a year from now will probably be Journey to the Center of Aerith, which I think is like a very huge, fertile setting for a ton of stuff. Yeah, exactly. Start your engines now.
I mean, sir, we tell everybody to let their exclusives out on Raw that you're okay with it. Stefan, we just got the exclusive right here.
Breaking news. I mean, this is just an idea at this point. It's a year out, and we'll learn a lot from the Purple Planet experience. But whatever we learned, I want to apply to that, because I mean, it's basically the hollow interior of a world. Like, there's so much you could do with it, and Harley did a lot with it. It's been, how many years has it been? 5, 6, 7 years since we published that. And I always felt like it should have been a box set. It didn't get quite as much development as it could have had. So anyway, yeah. That's the one we were thinking about doing somewhere down the road. If you want to start thinking on that, everybody.
Very exciting news. Very exciting news. Stefan, well, that kind of leads right into question number 7, if you want to hit it.
Sure thing. It's what are the future plans for the DCC Lankhmar line? Things have slowed down a little bit. I mean, other projects, new projects gonna take priority. That's how business works. But what are the current plans?
So we're number 15 is the House of Jade and Shadow, if I remember correctly, which is coming out in, I want to say, June of this year. So there are more adventures coming. After that, what I'd like to do, a lot of the earlier ones have sold out. Like, it's great that there's so much interest. We had to reprint the box set twice, I want to say, and the early adventures are sold out at this point. So after we release number 15, I want to do a Tome of Adventure that compiles. Tome of Adventure can only hold 7 or 8 adventures, but compiles maybe, numbers 1 through 7. There was also, we long ago published 3 preview products with black and white covers. Patrons of Lankhmar was the one where, so we pulled content from several of those to go into the box set, but Patrons of Lankhmar had several patrons that were never included in the box set. They've basically been out of print for a long time. So when we do the Tome of Adventure, I want to pull those patrons into that, as well as adventures 1 through 6 or 1 through 7 or something like that. Anyway, so that's probably in the next 6 to 9 months worth of thought, is those 2 titles for Lankhmar, and then probably something else after that.
Very cool. I know I see Nin Gobble's Cave going for like $60-$80 online sometime,
Seriously? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if anyone has a second copy and needs, I don't know, well, not that much money, but just a little bit extra.
Well, that one was tough to find.
Something.
That one was tough to find a couple of years ago. There was only a few copies left out there.
I
think I luckily picked one up at NTRPG Con a couple of years ago. Stefan, do you want to hit Mr. Goodman with question number 9, and I'll take number 10?
Sure thing. It's what do you have a most favorite or a most memorable house rule for DCC? Either something that maybe it's something that is like, that's really clever. Golly, I wish I'd done that, or just, why would you do that? I don't understand that. So whichever direction your mind sparks in.
I feel like the whole game, it's okay to house rule it, so I don't have a favorite per se, but I will say RPG design has evolved a lot just in the last maybe 5 years. There's like this accelerating pace of change, partly because of Kickstarter. And then I think now YouTube, I think, is feeding some of that. So I almost feel like there's room. There will never be a DCC second edition. Let's just say that. But we have dropped rules like, luck tokens appear in Lankhmar, but don't appear in the core rules. The annual had some rules additions. There's whatchamacallit, grudge tokens that appear in Dying Earth. We have dropped little random rules all over the place, and some of those, like the original annual, is now out of print. So I feel like there is room at some point to do, again, no rules changes, no second edition, but some sort of DCC, like, what's the right word? Supplement, yeah, or maybe even just a reimagining. Like the layout of DCC was very appropriate for 2012. Now there's this trend towards products that are much more concise in their layout. I mean, I was trying to inspire the writing of Appendix N. Now people write like technical manuals and try to fit it all on one page in a certain very specific kind of layout. So I think there's room to kind of represent the title in some ways.
An expansion.
Yeah, or maybe just like a box set where we change the layout, include some of the random rules for luck tokens or grudge tokens or whatever that were hidden in little places elsewhere, something like that.
Mike had talked on like maybe the stream at Gen Con or something about a possible future box set. I think where like some of the format inspiration is a little bit of that, and also like the red box or the basic box. So I don't know, aimed at something being simple and easier to not some people get intimidated by the size of the book. I don't know, is that part of that answer?
Yeah, exactly. That's sort of, Mike and I have been talking about something like that. So this isn't a direct answer to the question, but less about a memorable house rule and more about just pulling together all the random side rules / house rules that we put in different places and making it an easier, more accessible approach. I mean, it's fascinating to me. The DCC quick start rules are, I want to say, 32 pages long. I think we fit them all in for levels 0 through 1. You can play the game through level 1 with that, and you don't need the other 400 to level 2. Okay. You can cut out like 450 pages of the rulebook, So I think, to your point, Stefan, the rulebook is intimidating to some people. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to say, look, you really only need this much of the rules. The rest is basically spell tables, and that can be a separate installment of some sort.
Might we see any MCC quick start rules coming anytime?
Yes. So we actually laid those out a year ago. We've been too busy and never got around to sort of releasing them and printing them. So whenever we have like nothing to do for 2 weeks, we'll bring that back to the front. So one of these days.
What about another annual? Could there ever be another DCC annual?
There could be. It's like a running joke that it took us whatever it was 4 or 5 years to get the first annual out. So we produced one annual in 13 years or 12 years or whatever it's been. So sure, in another 13 years, I'm sure we'll have number 2.
All right, we've got a great question from Marsmell in chat again. Do you think the Gonzo nature of DCC is due to the stories of Appendix N, the people that read it and create games, both?
Yes, definitely. If you look at, I don't think I used the word Gonzo at any point up until the year 2014 or something. I never described the game that way. I never used that as a thinking about it. It's been used to describe the game ever since it was published, but that was never part of the intent. What I think what people interpret as Gonzo was really considered mainstream fiction back in between the 1930s and 1960s. And nowadays, so have you ever heard the term scientific fiction? If you go back, like the term fantasy is a modern nomenclature. The term science fiction is very modern. If you go back to Weird Tales in the 30s, which was, they were simultaneously publishing H.P. Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith, Edgar Rice Burroughs. Are you guys seeing these balloons?
Yeah. I don't know.
I got this. No, so I upgraded my operating system on my computer, and it has this new feature that if you do like certain things with your hands, hold on, let's see if I can make it do this. There you go. It detects it inside Zoom. This keeps happening on my calls now. Apparently, I naturally, the balloon thing has happened over and over. So I guess I naturally do whatever makes balloons happen. Stupid Zoom. Anyway, yeah, I know. So where I was going with this was like Weird Tales published a variety of authors who nowadays we would say, well, clearly this person was horror and this person was fantasy and this person was something else. But that is not how they were interpreted back in that era, that they were just weird fiction. And so what people call Gonzo, I think, is just the way fiction was written in the sort of glory days of appendix in literature back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And it was not unusual for what we consider to be science fiction and, fantasy to be mixed into the same tropes, and for things that are so on Gonzo, to happen in this fantasy literature. So I don't think it's Gonzo. I think it's what was once considered a very normal way of approaching things, and to me is exciting fiction. And by modern standards, there's a lot of like rules and guidelines and boxes that you put fantasy. Like I love it when debates erupt and people are like, well, there's no way a dwarf would do that, or dragons aren't like that. I'm like, guys, they're fantasy creations. Like you can make them however you want. There aren't rules for dwarfs and dragons. But when that happens and people start debating how a dwarf or a dragon, would respond, or what's appropriate for a dwarf or a dragon. And I remember this because those are ones I've witnessed in the past. Like that's when fantasy has become too codified. And when you just take a step back and remember that sense of wonder and amazement and fantasy that is, it's not a genre. It should be fantastic. So I don't think it's Gonzo. I think it's what fantasy should be.
All right. Well, that kind of leads us into our last question. Lane, if you bring up question 10, where do you see the Goodman Games company in 5 years? Now, in my head, it's already like Watsy Paizo Goodman Games is third in my head. I don't know if that's true or not. It's like the biggest publishing company out there, but where do you perceive the company to be in 5 years' time?
That's a great question. I think from a creative standpoint, it's amazing how much interest there's been in DCC RPG, and it is so much fun to be at the center of the storm. I was telling somebody the other day, like, I like a little bit of chaos in my life. Like that's what creativity should be, like a little bit of unexpected chaos. And I feel like we're in a great place right now with that happening. Certain parts of what we do are predictable. We know we're going to launch this Kickstarter, and do it in a certain way. But then once it starts, somebody has an idea, or a stretch goal sort of opens up another concept, or like Peril or Purple Planet, we're going to have 7 other creative partners on that same journey, and who knows where that could go. So, I don't have like a specific answer, but I would say hopefully we're still publishing DCC RPG. Hopefully it's still out there being enjoyed by a lot of fans. Hopefully the rules really haven't changed. There might be a new printing or a box set version, but I don't see any need for a second edition or anything like that. And hopefully just more people are enjoying it. I think also there's room, in the same way we did Mutant Crawl Classics, there's other genres we could apply to that same rule set. I mean, just like how Eric Bloat is doing it right now with Evolve for superheroes, genres and subgenres, other aspects of classic, appendix in and pre-appendix in literature. I was just talking to somebody the other day about, have you guys read Cheryl Moore, like Northwest Smith? Which is, it's the inspiration for Han Solo. If you read these novels written by a woman in the science fiction field from like 70 years ago or something, you read it and you're like, this is basically Han Solo. And it is Han Solo. George Lucas has stated that his inspiration for Han Solo was Northwest Smith, created by Cheryl, or she went under the nom de plume C.L. Moore because she didn't want to reveal she was a woman, because women don't write sci-fi. Like that's how it was, interpreted back then. But there's so much out there in terms of like rich history in the literature that I think would be fascinating to explore and publish. So that's something we've talked about is, do we go out, other variations on the core, DCC concept and apply it to other genres or other places. So hopefully we're still just exploring this journey and having a lot of fun along the way.
Is Harley going to finally, in 5 years' time, have gotten you to make a board game? He seems to always be trying to make a board game.
Yeah. So RPGs typically don't survive more than 3 to 5 years. Like it is, you'll see these Kickstarters that are $1 million Kickstarter, and check back in 3 to 5 years, nobody's playing it. Like there's a big difference between publishing and playing. For a game to survive, it has to be played and played and played and played. And that's how games sort of self-propagate. So I really am still amazed that DCC is still being played and still being enjoyed. It's just sort of it's awesome. It's not something I ever expected.
And growing.
Yeah. And so probably like, I don't know, we released the game in 2012, and probably in like 2014 or 2015 or something. I can't remember the exact year. I went to Harley and I was like, there's no way this game is going to last. We need a plan for what comes next. Let's do a board game. So it's not so much that Harley is trying to get me to publish it. It's that I asked him to design a board game, and he made a really cool board game, Warlords of the Purple Planet, which I helped playtest in a version of it, 8 years ago or whatever it was. And the plan was, when DCC slowed down, then we do this really cool. There's actually a series of conceptualized board games that we had, but we don't need to. There's tons of interest in what we're doing right now. So I still want to do it someday, but at the same time, I also don't want to, I want to keep doing an amazing job.
There's a lot of more
board games
components
are
than a
hard.
book.
Yeah, board
Yeah,
games
exactly.
are hard to be successful at. Yeah, well, there's other genres that could be explored out there. We have DCC Western now with Weird Frontiers. There could be a whole DCC horror, subgenre there.
That's a
But
great
DM
call.
Kojo asked, "Will Michael Curtis's Phantasmagoria adventures come out?"
Dude, Kojo, you got quite a memory. So Mike and I have this like document that lists all the stuff that was either written or half written that we're like, we really need to get around to publishing that someday. So yes, that you must have play tested one of them with him at GaryCon or something, but that is on the list to someday get published. One of these days. There's like too many ideas. It's amazing how many. This is why I know we'll still be doing this years from now, because we have an amazing group of creators who contribute to this game, and there are so many ideas that we just can't get around to publishing them all.
Yeah, that is a lot. All right. Well, I think probably our last question for the evening is going to be you've had a very successful indie RPG summit. Congratulations on that. Goodman Games has becoming a distributor of other RPG, sub companies and third party publishers. What role do you see yourself taking within the next 5 years?
Great question. Kickstarter is really interesting and drive through because you can jump right into publishing with essentially zero experience, which I've observed many people do. And I was fortunate, I guess, to have started out in an era where none of that existed. It was really freaking hard. And you had to go find a printer and go talk to somebody and find a distributor and sell to stores. And so I learned in an era where I essentially had to work with other people who taught me. And so that's what I think is harder to find these days. So part of what I wanted to do with the summit was get a lot of knowledge and expose that knowledge to a lot of creators to hopefully share that knowledge. And then the role that I've realized that I can provide for a lot of creators who perhaps have less experience than I do is that I can help them with aspects of the industry that are the word that comes to mind is inchoate, but like much more, hidden behind the scenes, where it is not obvious to many people how you sign up with a distributor. Frankly, it's a mystery for a lot of people. And a lot of what I call the up and coming creator population is used to logging onto Mixam and ordering a print job through an online interface, then logging on to Kickstarter and creating a project through an online interface, and then logging on to DriveThru and creating your selling portal through an online interface. And I learned to publish by talking to people. I didn't do anything online ever for the first 15 years of my publishing career, and I think there's an element of just a different style of learning to learn to approach things. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that I think the service that I can offer a lot of folks now is access to the parts of the industry that are harder to find. We signed with Diamond Book Distributors, which those who don't know is a huge feat. We are one of a handful of RPG publishers signed with them along with Paizo. And it took me a long time to close that contract. But, and Diamond operates on a scale that's completely different from anything that most people are exposed to. Within the RPG sector. So they placed their first purchase order a couple weeks ago for essentially a 3-month supply in one of the 3 channels they service. And I had to do a completely new print run of DCC RPG just to fulfill their first purchase order. Like they're ordering an enormous amount by RPG industry standards, which is amazing. And it's sort of, we're getting to this level where DCC is reaching even more people, but sort of navigating to Diamond, it took me many years of experience to even get, most people don't even know who they are. It took me many years of experience to get to the point where I could identify that was an opportunity I should go for. And what was really satisfying was we actually got an email yesterday. So if there's anybody in Brazil watching this, we're very glad that your products or our products are now available to you on Amazon.com.brazil or however that works. Apparently, I didn't even realize. I knew Diamond had a vast reach. That includes much improved access to the Brazilian market. So Brazilian fans, you can now get Goodman Games products on Amazon.Brazil with apparently local shipping because Diamond is able to provide that, which I didn't realize. But Diamond has a reach beyond anything else that I've seen in the gaming industry. So what I can offer a lot of other publishers now is it is highly unlikely that many publishers would be able to sign with Diamond on their own, but we can provide that as something we can offer. And if you're doing quality products that could get out there and I see a lot of people say like, I'm already on Amazon, what do I need you for? And I say, do you have A+ content? And they're like, I don't know what that is, and that's where you get to have a little video with your listing and you get 5 photos. And like, there's, you'll notice some Amazon listings are a lot more sophisticated than others. And we've all gone onto Amazon and searched for like men's shoes or whatever. And there's always like certain ones are sponsored, but then there's another one, that certain ones always show up. And then you're like, no, I wanted the whatever. I always wear Nikes or whatever. And you have to go to like page 6 before you find the ones you want, because they don't have the search prioritization. Like there's all these aspects of distribution, even on Amazon, that are that you can get with Diamond, you can't get with other companies. So that's a very long way of saying that I think we're in a position to do things now that aren't necessarily available to other publishers, and we can offer that as a service. And if it's a cool product that I'd like to see out there, I'm happy to help provide that service. But that's what I think I can provide over the coming years.
All right, so no bid for president 5 years or 4 years from now, or
I don't want to be president, man. That's a terrible job.
Politics.
No, absolutely not.
The,
actually, on that note, sorry, politics. We did an MLK DCC shirt a couple weeks, or I guess a week ago. We're going to do a Pride shirt later this year. We also have a Wisconsin themed shirt. I do think I want to be more vocal in supporting, causes that I think are appropriate and right. So you will see a little more stuff like that. But not politics per se, just like being inclusive and being nice.
Awareness,
diversity,
yeah,
like
awesome.
awareness. Yeah.
That's outstanding. Well, also, I guess we should mention that a big update went out for Dark Tower today.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So if you're a Dark Tower backer, you should get an email from BackerKit that lets you log in and essentially, process your final add-ons and shipping costs. The shipping costs should actually be better than you expected, especially if you're an international backer. We've worked out local shipping, so you'll get local shipping in the EU and UK from a UK point, in Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia from an Australian point, and so on. But in case you're wondering if shipping seems expensive, that's because these suckers are massive. So I have advanced copies, and these are big. So yeah, if you ship 3 hardcovers and a slipcover, it weighs a lot. So yes, there will be a postage charge involved, but what you're getting is amazing. It turned out great.
It looks gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we will have the Janelle Jackway's memorial cover as well for DCC number 105. So Janelle's funeral is next. Not this Friday, but the following Friday. So I'll be going. So if you guys want to send tributes or whatever, Janelle was awesome. And it's really, sad that she's passed on. So, but yeah, so sorry, go ahead.
Half the proceeds from that memorial cover, if people want to put that as an add-on, go to help Janelle's family cover remaining medical expenses.
Yes. Yeah. I ran the cover by Becky, her wife. Becky loved it. And she provided the actual photo to go on the cover. So, but yeah, the GoFundMe covered most of the medical expenses, but Becky's still paying down bills. So she'd appreciate the additional support. So
yeah, that was a great picture. That looks like a great cover. And you guys can see that cover in the Dark Tower update that just went out. So log on to the Kickstarter or check your email and it should be there. Fill out your sheets. Mr. Goodman, thank you for coming on the show this evening. We hope to have you on again in the future. Is there anything else you would like to say as we're heading out?
Keep playing games and keep having fun. Like, sometimes we have hard days here at Goodman Games. And as Chris likes to say, a hard day at Goodman Games is, better than a good day at most other companies. So just remember, we do this for fun. So have fun.
That's Gary Con and the other conventions are right around the corner. That's right. Hex Brawler. Goodman Games is going to have a huge presence at conventions. The word of DCC is only spreading. Stefan, is there anything else you want to say as we're headed out?
Much the same as Joseph. Keep rolling dice and keep being kind to one another.
All right, everybody. We will see you. Our next show should be February 6th, and I believe Bob Brinkman is coming back. We're going to have to come up with questions for Bob because I don't know if we have any review questions for him, Stefan.
We'll just have him comment on how good Joseph's answers were.
We'll have him.
You should ask him questions about ask him questions about his feelings.
Okay. I'll ask him where what Skulls and Bones. Oh, it's been so long since his pirate scene. I can't even remember what it's called. I'll ask him where the second one is.
Creators love to hear where's your second issue.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.